Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun cash flow forecasting software, where we help the office of the CFO leave spreadsheets behind, delivering clear and accurate forecasts to the management team. And joining me today is Adam Nathan, CEO at Blaze, a company that helps teams of one create better content in half the time, all in their unique brand voice. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks for having me, Blaine.
So, Adam, when did you first get the entrepreneurial bug?
Great question. I think, for a long time, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do, but probably like a lot of entrepreneurs, I was always starting things and building things from when I was a kid. Uh, when I applied to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do afterwards. I thought some schools I applied initially went for undergrad to be a civil engineer. Some schools I applied to study politics, some for business. I eventually went to Duke, where I was allowed to build a major that combined all three. And building systems that help people has always been kind of a theme in my career. After college, I worked in the Obama administration in the White House for a couple of years, working on healthcare and financial regulatory reform. After that, I worked for a nonprofit consulting firm, helping large foundations like the Gates Foundation and the Salvation Army and Susan G. Komen restructure their operations. After that, I worked for an airline, running their network planning team. I worked at Hawaiian Airlines during a period of big expansion for them. So spent a lot of time doing things that had nothing to do with startups, but were really about, how do you make change in large organizations or in complex systems. And then I went to business school at Harvard Business School, again, kind of not really knowing what I wanted to do afterwards. There's an internship you do between your 2 years, and a lot of my friends had very clear plans to go into investment banking or consulting. I applied to 3 companies that I thought were just really cool, and that they had built distinctive cultures that produced great products for people. They were Starbucks, Nike, and Apple. Got offers at them, went to work at Apple, having never even owned an iPhone before. They had to send me one for the internship because I was an Android user, but I worked on the iOS product marketing team, which is the team that designs new features for the new operating system every year for the iPhone. And my first day of the internship was WWDC, which is Apple's annual conference for releasing the new iOS. And again, I had no idea really anything about Apple. And I arrived at the Moscone Center here in San Francisco for the conference. Surprised to see like thousands of people lined up outside the conference center waiting to get in for the keynote. And when, they dropped the ropes, people like ran into the auditorium to grab seats in the front, and people were, on the edges of their chairs as Tim was announcing the new features. And I remember sitting outside for lunch that day and just watching all these developers excitedly download the SDKs and use the API to just build what we had just released. And I remember thinking to myself, like in this light bulb moment, oh yeah, like this is what I want to do. I want to build something that is able to improve people's lives as much as Apple's products and features do. And after that, it was just like super clear that I should be a founder and that this is kind of my calling. And that wasn't the end of the story. That was really the beginning of the story, because that was 10 years ago. So it's not like I went straight from there to where I am today, but it certainly was the moment where I realized, oh yeah, like this is the thing that aligns perfectly with my interests and skills and strengths.
Well, and what I find kind of interesting is that, like, when I think I was entrepreneurial to a degree, but I think like you, I didn't realize I wanted to be an entrepreneur until I did. But I think what I realized looking back was, I think it was kind of like a magnet, and I was kind of sucked in that direction, and I just didn't recognize it till later. And like you've had some really interesting experiences, but what I find really kind of interesting is that you had exposure into these, like, the Obama administration, and like that. Okay, that's a really amazing experience in that. And you kind of left and went to school, and then you left there and went here, and then you went to, and it felt like how much of that was starting to, I guess, gather and understand opportunity and pulling all of this in, and like it must have really colored the fabric that sort of led you into an entrepreneurial endeavor. Like, Maybe you can speak to a little bit of just how some of those formative years built up to the point where you went, that's where these two things come together.
Yeah, well, I think some entrepreneurs are technologists that they build stuff because they're interested in code and building cool new things just because of the tech itself. I think some entrepreneurs tend to be more business people where they're just really interested in making a lot of money and or having control over an entity, over their time or other people's. Um, I think I'm much more of a people person or like a humanist in some ways, where I'm fascinated by why things work the way they do at an organizational or a human level. Like how do we as a society or a species work together, sometimes functionally, sometimes not, to achieve or not achieve results. Like that's the thing I've always been interested in, and I think you can see that as a through line between what I've done in my career. And I think that also translates to what we do today at Blaze. Blaze is a marketing tool for people who are not professional marketers, people that have to produce great marketing to grow their businesses, but have no time or skills or money. And so, build the solution for our customers isn't to build a technology product for people that love technology. It's to build a product that works for people that don't know how to use technology. And so it has to be simple and easy and fun and fast. And to build well for these types of people, which I think is actually most people in the world, you have to approach it, you have to understand what a human is really trying to do, the context in which they operate, the constraints that they have on them, what their hopes and dreams and needs are, not just functionally, but also emotionally, the role that social status plays into their work. We at Blaze, we built a really compelling brand that people love. It's the key reason people try the product. And that's, you don't see a ton of technology companies that are building great brands, but I think great brands tap into this really important vector of how people make decisions, which is how they feel and what they want.
Yeah.
And I think my training and what I did before starting a company helped me understand those aspects of why things work the way they do. And I think there's not enough of that sometimes in certainly in the technology or startup space. Apple is a company that very much understands people at a core
Yeah.
level, compared to, say, Microsoft or Google or even Facebook, which almost treat people as if they're like unfeeling machines, it seems, in how they make decisions or what they build. But yeah, and even how I look at my career, I think I'll be starting things, if I'm lucky, well beyond whatever we do here at Blaze. Even if Blaze is a failure, Blaze is a multi-billion-dollar company, which is it's certainly the trajectory we're on and what I hope to happen. No matter what happens, I think I'll go back and I'll start more things again. And I think in general, it feels like these days the social compact we have with each other is broken. You can see that, I think, in the recent election here in the United States, how people feel about our existing institutions. But it feels like to buy into society, we expect society to give us, easy, affordable, high quality access to things that help us succeed: education, healthcare, access to work or jobs, capital. And a lot of that's just broken for a lot of people. It's not working anymore, and people are really angry. And I don't think that government is going to be the solution to those things anymore. It takes too long. It's too hard. It's too critical to build stuff in the public space. So I think private companies, startups, are going to be where solutions to these big problems are going to come from. And I think we need startups to be thinking about those grand challenges, and not just technologists who are building cool things with the latest and greatest in AI or whatever the trend is, but really thinking about business as a way to help people. And that's how I think about my career and what we're doing here at Blaze. And I think that's what makes me maybe a little different than other entrepreneurs. And I hope and think there's many more people like me out there. But it's kind of using startups as a methodology to test and scale new ideas to a lot of people quickly, combined with an orientation around the world that I want to live in, and the values I think should be part of the future. It's you look around at the world as we have it, and you're like, how did it become this way? And it's often just because a couple people wanted it to be so, and had the willpower and the grit and the creativity to see their vision through. I think that explains the world we live in more than anything else. And I think at the heart of all that is a great entrepreneur at the end of the day. And in the past, that person might have been elected to office, or they might have built a big like industrial empire. I think today those people are starting companies. They're building startups.
Well, and I think and I do want to go back to this point where like 10 years ago, we're going to go back and figure how this actually started, how you actually went through these steps. But I will say that by and large, most of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed on this show have had some sort of desire or mission, and it just sort of carried them along. There were some that it was opportunity. There were some where it was like, I have to survive, I have to make some money. But even some of those entrepreneurs, after a time, started to say, there's got to be more, and I've got to solve problems, right? And so I think it's a little bit of I hesitate to say that I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs that I think are truly successful when they go into it to make money. I think go into it to solve a problem, and it usually is a problem that people are facing, obviously. And so I think that's something, a thread that seems to join a lot of entrepreneurs together. And I know in my career, it's always sometimes good or bad, it's always about solving the problem, and sometimes probably not enough about how to make a buck, but it's a challenge we all face. I do want to go back to this, like, so you're with Apple, you just started there, you saw this frenzy of developers, and suddenly it's like, this is it. This is what I want to do. What was your first thought at that point, going all the way back to that, sitting outside that trade center in San Francisco, when you're kind of like, okay, what sort of hit you?
You mean like, what did I do next after that, or what?
Yeah. Like what was this idea, and how did you like, what was the first step you took?
Yeah. I think conventional advice to a lot of new aspiring founders is to build what you know. I do something in a field that you have experience in. I think that's why you see so many founders build like note-taking apps or productivity tools, because we all do that every day in most jobs. And I, before business school, had just worked at an airline. And when I was working at Hawaiian, I worked with this amazing guy who's probably going to be the next CEO of Southwest Airlines. And we were exploring some ideas around new opportunities in the airline space, like what we would do at Hawaiian if we really wanted to grow the company. And so during my second year at business school, and then in the months even afterwards, I seriously explored starting an airline. And so I wrote a business plan for one. I don't often talk about this because it was, it's kind of crazy to say, because a lot of people don't just try and start an airline. It's one of the, conventionally seen as one of the worst industries out there. There's like a famous quip, if you want to make $1 million, start as a billionaire and build an airline. But a lot of what we were working on with the airline has actually come to pass. Many airlines we are focused on this segment called long haul leisure. Places like Las Vegas or Orlando are world famous destinations, have a lot of international demand, but aren't served because they don't fit within the business models of network carriers like United or Delta that primarily serve corporate travelers. So you need a different business model where you essentially attach the flight to the rest of the itinerary. In Europe, this is how a lot of vacation providers work, where you buy a package. So we're basically trying to reinvent this business model for the 21st century, where rather than buying a package, you actually get to pick which hotel and pick activities based on your vibe, and a cutting edge digital experience, but really using the airline or the flight as the customer acquisition tool. That's what people often they buy their flights first. So if you can kind of use the flight as a way to acquire customers, and then use the rest of the package to build margin, you can build quite a good business. And many airlines have actually done this successfully since 2015. I think we were, first to the party. But we ended up building the software behind that we sold to another company, which is pretty cool. And that was my first foray into really just exploring what it takes to start a business, learning learning the easier versus harder ways to build a business, learning the hard way that software is easy to build and easy to get to market and monetize compared to, say, buying planes and getting an operating certificate for an airline. I spent probably the first year after business school really working on this airline idea, and definitely caught the bug, and then kind of went from there.
So I'm going to take us off track a little bit here just for a second, because I am curious. And I don't know much about airlines outside of, I've obviously flown on them, and the experience usually isn't very good, to be complete. Like, everybody kind of gripes about airlines, and I'm one of them, you know.
Yep.
And I've always wondered, and I don't know anything about airlines. There's no even a nugget in my brain as I was ever sort of looking at this. I'm just more of curious. Is there a space in that industry for, like, it feels to me like you've got your low budget, and then you've got like extremely expensive. There doesn't seem to be that middle ground where you drop an extra $300, $500 or something, and you have a decent experience. Like, you have more legroom, you can bring on a luggage or whatever. Like, is there room for low end luxury, I would say, or like the entry level luxury where it's not business class, it costs like 10, 15 times or whatever a regular ticket? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, because I always wondered why I can't go and spend a little more and have a little nicer.
I think in the United States, there was a carrier that did this, which is JetBlue, which basically the whole premise was slightly nicer economy. There was, when it launched in 1999, they had a bit more legroom in economy. They had seatback TVs, they had better snacks, nicer planes, and it was all economy. And I think it thrived for a long time, basically flying people from New York, where it started at JFK, to Florida. Now it's a semi-national carrier. The short answer to your question, though, is no. It's JetBlue is also instructive in that today they're really struggling. Just trying to build something in the middle of Southwest is another example of this, actually, which is also struggling these days. It turns out that there's a large swath of the public that, while they say they value those things, they actually won't pay like a ton more for extra legroom. Some will, but you can basically monetize that as a new class in the cabin. This is premium economy or economy plus in the United States. So you can basically charge for people who want to pay for more legroom, but people won't pay for it on the whole. And so there's a lot of price conscious folks on the lower end of the market, and then people on the top end that have a higher willingness to pay. They want business class. They want to be able to fly anywhere in the world, which requires alliances and partnerships. They want a lie flat seat. They want lounges when they're traveling for business or on a nice vacation. And so those are high cost expenditures that you need to acquire those high revenue passengers. And so you've actually seen the network carriers like United and Delta do a good job of basically segmenting the market, where they have basic economy. If you're super price conscious, you can buy premium economy. If you want a slightly nicer seat on your way to Europe, there's lie flat business class for people who are traveling on corporate accounts or have those funds to spare. And so these bigger airlines are now essentially multiple airlines in one, where they've been able to efficiently segment the market and charge people for different amenities that they care about. And you see kind of the Southwest and the JetBlue really struggling to be in this middle, where there's not really a market there. And even these days, I think with higher costs around fuel, Spirit and Frontier on the low end of the market in the United States are struggling too. But generally, I think that's why you see Europe is another good example of this, or Asia, where you see low-cost carriers who appeal to price-conscious people who, of course they would want a seatback TV and more legroom, but they don't actually want to pay for it. And then you have higher-cost carriers on the other end who are giving that side of the market what they need.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because I was like, I'm looking at it going, well, they obviously know what they're doing, but I'm like, why can't I get, more comfortable? So it's interesting, and it's
there's many
there's
like a famous example of American who in the early 2000s had this more legroom and coach pitch, and there was a ton of advertising marketing. Like all their marketing just said the most legroom and coach. And it turns out that while people said that they cared about that, they didn't actually want to pay for it. And so then it was a huge mistake. American had to undo all these plane configurations, because it turned out that the revenue premium that they thought they would get from just saying, hey, you get more legroom, it's included in your fare, wasn't actually worth it to people. And most folks just ended up picking the lowest price ticket. So
Yeah. Amazing.
sure, people will make this mistake again in the industry, and we'll just keep going in a circle and relearning the same lesson. But
well, there's a really interesting lesson in there too, though, is really truly understanding your customer isn't always listening to what they say. It's how do you dig past what they say to get to the problem you actually are solving for them, right? And that's always a challenge, because I don't think it's like people who go out and set to sort of lie. I think they actually believe this, but when push comes to shove, and when they're putting their dollar down, what do they truly value, and what problem do you truly need to solve is oftentimes quite a different problem than you think.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's in startup land, finding product market fit is an art, not a science, because it does require. It's just really hard to find good new markets. Most markets where there's a need, there's already a product that's serving it, and it's really hard to, I compare it to like prospecting for oil or minerals, where like you're in a field and there's like a ton of wells already, and you have to find some crack in the ground to access a new form of minerals or oil. Like it's like fracking, where it required a ton of like creative innovation to unleash something that didn't look good and turn it into something that's valuable. And it's really hard to find an unmet need. And especially if you raise venture dollars, it's hard to find an unmet need that can grow from zero to $1 billion business in 10 years. There's just only a couple markets that can support that. And often it takes, as you mentioned, seeing something other people don't see. Most people, it's like the faster horses problem, where a lot of customers will tell you they want a faster horse when in reality they need a car. And so there's a duality, I think, as an entrepreneur, you need between being able to truly listen to customers and understand really what they're saying, but then sometimes provide a solution that is different or better than what they're imagining it to be. I think we always say that a truism internally is, believe customers' truth, like listen to exactly what they're saying. Do not impose your own ideas on top of them, but then innovate from there. What they say they want isn't necessarily what they actually need.
Yeah, and it's a balance that we're always, like, because our customers, virtually every single one comes from a spreadsheet. They understand it. They've been using it for a long time. They're very comfortable there, but they have a lot of challenges with it, and that's a struggle that we like. Same thing. It's like we want to hear exactly what they say, exactly how they phrased it, and then we have to figure out what's sometimes the true challenge, that next step. Where is that problem? It can be obviously like that's why a tech startup is not, for the faint of heart, I suppose. So now I just want to kind of go back now. And so you've had some of these experiences here, and you started to say, okay, I want to take a bit of a jump here. So you knew that suddenly you're like, I want to be in this area. But how did you identify that problem where you said, here's the problem I'm going to solve, or that we're going to dive into? And was it like kind of the first idea, or was it like, went here, went there, saw an opportunity?
Yeah. So after my foray into the airline world, I went to work at Lyft, where I ran pricing. After that, I worked at a fintech called Varo. We were building a nationally chartered bank in an app. And then after that, I realized, continuing to work for other folks would eventually lead me to depression. So I decided to quit and go back to trying to start my own thing. And it took basically a year to consider ideas. I spent a lot of time basically diligencing concepts. Maybe had 3 to 5 ideas I seriously examined, and I used basically like a business model approach to vet them. I went to business school, so this came a bit more naturally to me. But I think often people get entranced by ideas. They get into this romantic relationship with something, and it's easy as people as humans to imagine all the way something can go right, especially if you're an entrepreneur where you're inherently optimistic. But entrepreneurship, I think, is not about creating risk. It's actually about mitigating risk. And the way to build a company is essentially to force rank your assumptions around the business, and prioritize them, and then take the riskiest thing first, and then validate or invalidate it, and then move down all the way. And if you're able to basically prove out that your assumptions are right, you'll end up with a really great business. But it's better to know sooner if something that you believe is wrong so that you can pivot or shift strategies. And I think a lot of all the successful entrepreneurs I know think this way. They are really humble when it comes to putting their own ideas against the force of reality, and being like totally fine with ditching something if it doesn't work, because what they care about more than anything is being successful rather than being right. And to be successful, you need to know the truth. You want to be able to see it as clearly and quickly as you can. And I found, at the advice of a bunch of people I knew who had done this before me, that basically like writing out my idea for the business using this like standard business model template was really helpful, because answering like, okay, well, how do you describe your product in a sentence? What are its key attributes and why are they better than the competition? What's your pricing? How do your unit economics work? How are you going to acquire customers? Who do you need on the team? It almost sounds like overly simplistic questions are really easy ways to just think through all the aspects of how you're going to build a business. But more importantly, then show it to other people who are experts in the industry, or even just friends who are ignorant about what you're doing, and have them read through it and ask, like, what doesn't make sense here? Like, what seems like BS? What doesn't seem right? Because what the idea of this business planning exercise is not just to think through the business, but to expose like where the fault lines might be, and figure out pretty quickly, like, oh, where might you be wrong? Where might this whole thing fall apart like a house of cards if you're incorrect? And then to use those areas to quickly go and test the market, talk to customers, get data to figure out, are you right or wrong? And so I looked at 3 or 5 ideas that I thought were brilliant and were killer, but like, it turns out, there was one thing through this business planning exercise, I realized, oh, the unit economics are all off, or, we're going to have to raise $100 million and make $300 million to only make $3 million in profit. This seems like a great idea, but the market's not big enough, or the market's big enough, but there's a lot of great competitive alternatives out there, and it's going to be too hard to ship people over. And I eventually found an idea that was the first product we built, called Almanac, where, immediately when I told people, it was compared to the other things I had been thinking about, it was really easy to describe. When I told my friends about it in a sentence, their reaction was, oh my God, how do I get access to this right now? And I think that's what you want when you're building a business. You want to be pulled into the market. I always compare this to like a first date, where if you go on a first date and you have to decide after the end of the date, are you going to marry this person? You don't want that date to be like a 7 out of 10. You don't want it to be like, oh yeah, they were interesting and pretty nice and we had pleasant conversation. You want it to be like fireworks exploding. Like, I need to see that person again. Like, I don't want that date to end. And startups are the same way, where you are basically committing with often very little time or information to an idea that you're going to spend, if you're successful, 5 or 10 years on, or even worse, you could fail at. So you want to feel this, like, you want to feel your customers and your investors pulling you into the market. Literally, that's what product market fit feels like. Traction feels like. It feels like people need this thing so much that even with just a description or a shitty prototype or an incomplete product, like, people will pay you for it. And you finally know what that feels like when you've done a bunch of other things that haven't worked, because you can be like, oh yes, this is different this time. Kind of like going on a bunch of bad dates before meeting your life partner. And so finally with Almanac, I felt that pull into the market, and I knew, oh yeah, like, we're onto something here. And that led me forward.
Oh man, you're almost giving me you're dragging me back into my daily here, because we, like with Dryrun, we, a lot of things you described, like we had some smoke, we had some embers, we had some, but we had to do a couple pivots. And the last pivot was like, it reminds me of a television producer I've known for a long time. And he used to say, it's like the number one thing is like, at what point do they say, holy shit? If you don't have that, it doesn't matter. Right. And so we kind of found a market. We were kind of growing, but it just felt like it wasn't quite right. And then we would sometimes get into these meetings with people that were like literally a couple of days ago, like the guy's dropping an F bomb. He's so like a CFO of a big business dropping an F bomb. He's so frustrated with their current state of affairs and so excited by what we can do for them. Now it's the gap between, okay, we found them, we found the problem, we know what they need. How do we get them on board and implemented and get them successful? And so it's been a really interesting experience for us that we can feel pull and we can see that problem. And but it's not like we still have to, now it's execute so that we can get them over the line. And it's we've never felt this kind of pull before, but it's like it doesn't get any easier. Just it's like a friend of mine says, it's like you climb over one rise and there's the next one's right behind it. You just got to keep climbing until you, I guess, get to the top of the mountain, right?
Yeah, I think early stage is a lot like the difference between pushing a boulder up a hill versus pushing a boulder down a hill. And when you don't have fit, yeah, it's you're pushing a lot. And when you do have fit, you're still kind of pushing the ball down because it's hard to build a product that actually effectively solves the customer's problem. That's, as you're mentioning, that's still a challenge to do. And at Blaze, we have millions of customers now. We're growing 40% month over month, and yet it's still so hard every day to build something that actually solves the problem people need. But we have that demand. We have that incredible traction in the market, and it makes it a lot easier because rather than people just churning or not using the product in the first place, they're screaming at us and they're telling us exactly what they need. And so it's a bit easier to push the ball down the hill or the boulder down the hill. Still takes a lot of work, but finding that pull is, again, it's so rare, and I think requires a bunch of luck, but also a lot of listening and determination. And one of my favorite ideas is that most startups don't die mid keystroke, meaning the reason a lot of startups die is not because they just run out of cash in the middle between coding it. Startups die because founders lose momentum or they lose motivation, because it's really hard and most people just give up and they'd rather do something easier or new again or work for somebody else. And so the like currency you're really dealing with in the early days is not cash, it's momentum, and this, which is a feeling on the team. Like, are we excited to wake up and do this again tomorrow? Do we feel like we're onto something? If you're just, my hair is crazy because I just came back from surfing. I'm a big surfer. Like, if on bad surfing days, you're just paddling all the time and it can feel like you're just constantly paddling and like, it fucking sucks. And you're like, I just want to go in. Like, I don't want to keep doing this. But, even on bad days where there's like onshore winds, like sometimes you'll get a little bit of a wave and you're like, okay, that was enough to kind of keep me paddling. And then of course, what you're looking for is a really good wave that makes all the paddling worth it, where you feel that pull, you glide, and it's like the best feeling in the world. That's what product market fit feels like. That's what founders are imagining. And I think you have to, if you don't catch a wave every once in a while, or even if it's a small wave, a lot of people give up. I don't think most companies die because they run out of money. They die because they run out of momentum. And it's critical to find a way for yourself and for your team to get through those initial, not just weeks or months, often years of time where you're just trying to figure it out. As you're saying, you're catching something a little bit here or there, like a signal, and you're trying to figure out, where do I position myself on the water to catch the wave and hope that it eventually comes.
Yeah. And that's a massive challenge, because we've been at this for a while, because we literally, and it was almost like there was enough, it wasn't even false positive. There's enough positive that you would keep going and go, yeah, but this isn't, like, it's too hard to scale. It's going to be too hard to, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, but these guys are kicking down our door. These people are like desperate. How do we, and I know, like, one of the things that I started to do sort of personally was, like, every Friday, it's become a habit. Every Friday I just sit and go, okay, what did we do this week? What did we accomplish that moved us forward? And I can't think of, like, there's always challenges. There's always stuff that goes wrong and some bad stuff, but I can't think of the last week. I don't even know if there was a week where I didn't go, yeah, we had some good stuff. We had this happened and this happened and this happened. And that moved us forward, because, like you said, it's a hard slog. I don't, Like I always listen to. I'm sure you have How I Built This with Guy Raz. Like I love those episodes because those are highly successful businesses, and every one of them, every one of those founders talks about the 10 times they nearly died and how they just kept at it, right? And it's a huge important part is just determination.
Yeah, I mean, with Blaze, so the team that worked on is the team that we have now for Blaze. We've been working together essentially for 6 years. I think the average tenure of the team is like 4.5 years. So most people have been in this ship with me for a while out at sea. And we've actually found product market fit 3 times. And we actually abandoned the first 2 ideas because they weren't big enough. We raised a lot of venture capital, and I think VC dollars are like jet fuel. You can operate a car or a motorcycle just fine on regular fuel, but you can't put jet fuel in them; they'd explode. Jet fuel only works in certain types of vehicles, like planes, that only serve certain types of markets that are really big and long and require that kind of fuel. And so I often encourage people not to raise venture capital because it constrains your markets to only those that can support tremendous fast growth in a short period of time. There's many good businesses you can build that don't need to scale from 0 to $100 million in 10 years. There's many markets that can support great businesses, that can go from like 0 to 10 million or 50 million, or by the way, that you like end up owning a larger share of because you own more of the business, so you don't need as much capital. But we've raised $50 million. And so we have to deliver huge returns to our investors. I have many friends that have started businesses that were growing pretty quickly, but not fast enough for their venture investors. And so they died because they just weren't growing fast enough. So Blaze is essentially the third iteration on an idea that we've been working on. And we had to we chose to abandon the first 2 ideas because, as you're saying, like they were right, but just not a perfect fit for the type of business that we've signed up to build. And that's really frustrating to have customers who want a product that you built and then kind of abandon it to build something even bigger. It's like, it's like you discover a pond and you fish in it and you find some good fish and you're like, hey, I see like a lake over there. And then you go to the lake and you find some fish in there too. And then you're like, oh, but there's an ocean out there. And that's what it's felt like building this business over time. I wouldn't recommend what we've done to anybody else. It's terrible to abandon markets that you spend a lot of time cultivating and developing. And I feel very lucky that we found the market we have now that can actually support the size of the business we want to build. But again, it's like one of those like don't do the thing you see people doing on TV type disclaimer where like it's a terrible experience. And you're signing up for massive struggle. And I think that's why you often see a lot of founders who build really, really big businesses, like don't go and try and do it again, because while it's really hard to go from 0 to 1 in the early days, it actually doesn't get easier. It just gets harder. I used to think like, oh, once we have product market fit and we figure out distribution, like what do I have to worry about? Like, it'll just be like, like over the rainbow and into the sunset. And, we started Blaze, or we launched Blaze November 23. It's been like 15 months or so, 14 months. We've scaled from 0 to $10 million in revenue in that time. We're on track to, hopefully cross $100 million this year. So that's like basically 21 months from 0 to $100 million in revenue, incredibly fast. And it's just gotten harder as we've gotten bigger and bigger. We have a team of 25 people, so we're doing it incredibly leanly. And I can see more now. I can see, more clearly now than ever how even at our scale and with our momentum, it's still so easy to die. It still feels like the whole thing is built like on sticks. The bigger you get, the thinner the air, the steeper the climb. And I think that's, I'm not saying this to discourage anyone who's listening. I think it's still great to do, but I just remember kind of my own ignorance. Like it's like climbing a mountain where you're like, you only see the top of the first hill and you're like, oh my God, like this hill's so hard. And imagine how good the view is going to be up there. And then you get to the top of that hill and you're like, oh wait, there's a huge mountain behind that. And it just kind of keeps going and going the further in you get to the mountain range. that's
Yeah.
kind of what my experience feels like now, where I know like, oh, even whatever mountain I think I'm climbing, like I know there's going to be another one that's even bigger and harder behind. And so I spend a lot more time on my own psychological state, maintaining my own energy, because as much as it is a sprint every day, every week, it's also a marathon. You know, if you are lucky and successful enough to find product market fit and traction, that just earns you the right to play a harder game for another 5 to 10 years. And I didn't realize that when I was starting, but I think is definitely the truth for any founder out there, that you know, eating glass for the first 1 to 5 years of the business is just really earning you the right to experience more pain for another decade. And so
Yeah.
a good thing to remember.
Well, I can, like, you know, you talk about that bit. We did the same, basically. Like I said, there's two basic pivots that were, it's easy to say that, but like you said, it is incredibly painful, incredibly difficult, incredibly risky, but it's like, we have to do what we have to do. And we're not venture backed. Like we've had a little bit of investment, primarily like today, we're basically sort of back to bootstrapped, but with what we're going after, it's like, that's what makes sense. That's how we have to do it. Um, but like you said, like if I were to go back to when I started this, knowing what I know now, would I do it? Like, I don't know. I probably would, but then at least you know some of the stuff you got to get through. But part of it is being naive enough to dive in and thinking that, oh, well, launch this thing and we'll be making this much money by this date, and this, all the numbers, and it all works out. And then, you know, pretty soon it's like, well, we've got an opportunity, but you know, we've got people working for us, and we've got customers, we got all these responsibilities. Um, and I wanted to sort of circle back to something you said, like with a startup founder, because the chances of a tech startup surviving is awfully low, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, how do you, like, what do you do to um, keep your mentally strong and healthy, as healthy as you can be, probably as a startup founder, right?
It's a great question. I think it goes back to the start of our conversation, where being in it for the right reasons is really important, and having a mission or some sense of drive to draw on when everything else is bleak. You know, it's frankly easy where we are right now, where we're adding like $1 million in revenue every 2 weeks. It's easy to draw on that as momentum, but that's the dirty secret of startups, is that it takes years to become an overnight success for everybody. You know, even founders that look like they're ingenues that came out of nowhere, like they've been working on it for 5 or 10 years. They put in the reps and the time. You just haven't seen it because they were doing it in the dark, just like all of us do. And their PR teams are crafting them as people who came out of nowhere. But everyone I know that has that story, has put the 10,000 hours in. And I think the common threads I've seen between really successful founders who have gone through that period are, one, they know that there's nothing else they can do. Like I said, it's true for me. Is like, I know that if I work for someone else, like I will quit or get fired eventually, because like I hate it, and I'm going to make everybody else hate being around me too, because my skills, which are, you know, the ability to like see around the corner a bit into the future, convince people of my ideas, manage and direct resources. Those are highly aligned with being a great CEO, and they're not aligned with being a great middle manager inside a big company. And so I know that this is what I'm meant to do. It's what I'm really great at doing. And so as hard as it might be to run a startup that doesn't have product market fit yet, the alternatives are worse. And I think a lot of work is like life is pain, work is pain. It's really about choosing which pain you want. And I prefer the pain of, for me, like suffering, you know, in a foggy forest, trying to figure out which direction to go next, as you were talking about, versus the pain of trying to like play politics in a big company to get my idea through 100 approval processes. And I think the second, so that's the first thing, is like, is this the only thing you can do? And knowing that it is can kind of propel you through the dark times. And then having an idea that keeps you up at night and gets you motivated to do it again in the morning. An idea that you're excited to spend 5 or 10 years of your life on. And I think that often comes down to who you're building for. I think people talk about just as I did. Talk about ideas more than people, but the difference, I think, between building a business and an art project is that in a business you're building for somebody else, and that often means, um, as I mentioned, humbling your own sense of what they need to actually listening to them and building for them. A lot of failed founders I see get entranced by their own idea and they don't want to listen to the market. And they say, and that's fine, but you're not going to make money that way because you're not building something people want or need or will pay for. And a lot of founders would rather die than like listen to people and do what people need. And I think that like the intersection of those two things of listening to people but still being happy is finding a group of people that you love to build for. I love our customers at Blaze. I love talking to them. I am not them at all. We serve small business owners, freelancers, creators, people that have taken a bet on themselves, often people that they don't live on the coast, they didn't go to fancy schools, they didn't work at big tech companies. In other words, the opposite of what I am. But I respect the hell out of them. I think that they have muscles and skills that I don't, that I could maybe never even build on my own. And I love spending my time making them more successful. And I think if you don't actually like your customers, you won't want to listen to them, you won't believe them, and therefore you won't be successful. So those two things of knowing that you can't do anything else and having an idea or a group of people that you're okay serving for 5 to 10 years, like those are the, I think, two critical ingredients to making it through the tough times to success.
Yeah. Well, and it's you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like I looked and I'm like, yeah, I can't do anything else. And I got probably a decade or two on you, and I know like I'd be even worse working for someone else. But I think what's interesting, like we've been through a couple of tough sort of pivots, and what that's done to our team is it's got us obsessed with our customers. We thought we were before. We realize now we weren't, and now every single meeting we have gets documented, and it didn't start out as being mandated. It started out as people sharing, and everyone wants to know. Like everyone's so, what did they say? What did they say here? And then we talk about it, and now we literally have systems in place that we built to support that because we all want to know. And it's that sort of culture I think has helped us immensely in the last few years, or at least the last couple of years, where that started to shift for us. And, but I wanted to dive in now a little bit, like you've talked a lot about Blaze and sort of what you do, but I kind of want to dive in now, like what exactly do you do and how do you do it?
Yeah, so Blaze is an AI marketing tool for small businesses and teams of one. We serve freelancers, agencies, creatives, e-commerce businesses, mom and pop shops on Main Street, who have to produce great marketing to grow on the internet, but often don't have the time or skills or resources to do so. And so Blaze is essentially like a virtual marketer on their team. So for $49 a month, Blaze will produce SEO and blog content, social media content, newsletters, websites, ads, all in your brand voice and style. Just from your website, we can diagnose how you often talk. We can learn about your products. We can detect your logos and colors and fonts to basically produce content that looks and feels exactly like you. And Blaze is really a full stack marketing platform where it brainstorms ideas and strategies for you, generates content, allows you to edit it, schedules and posts it like a CMS, and then analyzes it. So it basically does what you would hire an agency to do, or a full-time marketer, or spend nights and weekends trying to figure out on your own. But it does it in seconds to a really high degree of quality, often automatically for a super affordable price. And so our customers on average, within 5 or 6 months of using the product, see their revenue from digital channels grow 300% or more. And so ultimately what we care about is not just producing great content for people, but actually have that content lead to more revenue, more sales for our customers, so they can have time back to focus on things that matter, but also just be more in control of their lives and make more money.
I'll be checking this out right after this meeting because it sounds like, like it would really, that's the type of thing that our team is oftentimes we're doing this type of stuff. And like, as you can see, like we're doing podcasts, we do a lot of video content because it's harder to stand out with some of the written, but you have to do it. You have to have that foundation of written content and socials and that. I would absolutely be taking a look at that because it sounds like right up our alley, right up the alley for almost any business, of course. And just having gone through a massive exercise on positioning, it's kind of like timing is actually probably fairly good to take a look at that. So that's that sounds like an absolutely amazing product. Now I'll definitely be taking a look at it, Adam. So
yeah, it's super cool. It works really well, which is exciting. I use it my content on LinkedIn and Twitter, the first drafts of which I get from Blaze, and we have it at its core. It's a real-time document editor like Google Docs, and also a visual studio like Canva or Figma. And so you're able to actually edit the content on your own or with your team in the tool. So it's kind of a combination of AI and your own creativity. But yeah, when we were building it, like a lot of conventional wisdom in startup land is to build for enterprises. There's a ton of AI marketing products that are focused on professional marketing teams at big companies. But we saw this strain of demand, unmet need amongst small companies. When we showed our product to big companies, they're like, "Oh, this is interesting. I'll think about it. I got to show our legal team." But our current customers were, like, as I mentioned, just elated by what we saw, and even with an early incomplete version of the product, they were like, "I need this right now. How do I get access to it? How much is it?" And so it's been really exciting to kind of find that seam of demand that we were talking about. And there's 33 million small businesses in the United States. There's hundreds of millions of small businesses around the world. And a lot of people think they're bad businesses, which is why they're so underserved. People think they're small because they are shitty. We think they're small because they're actually great at what they do, often with not enough resources or time. And that's kind of our mission, is that we think just because you're small doesn't mean you can't be great. And with AI, there's this ability to level the playing field for small businesses and really rewrite the rules around who gets to win in the economy. It shouldn't be that you need a lot of money or power to be successful in America or really anywhere. It should be that the American dream is real, that all you need is a good idea and courage to bet on yourself and resilience and creativity along the way. And I think finally with AI, we're getting to a place where that can be the reality for most people rather than just a dream. And so that's the gratifying part about what we do, is seeing how it's really is not just building a big business that's growing and making money, but seeing the impact on millions of people every day around the world.
Yeah. That's amazing, Adam. How can people find you?
Yep. So everything I just mentioned is available at blaze.ai. We have a free trial, so you can check out the product, see how it works for yourself. And I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn for these types of startup pearls of wisdom. I read a newsletter as well. So would love for anyone listening to check it out. And yeah, would love to hear your questions. Feel free to DM me.
That's and I'll put that in the show notes, both Blaze AI, but I'm going to put in the newsletter link as well. Make sure that people make sure you guys sign up for that, because it's going to be some really useful info right to your inbox. And thanks, Adam. I really appreciate this. This was a really terrific conversation. I enjoyed hearing about Blaze, and also selfishly, we are going to check it out here as well, because it sounds like something that might be kind of handy for us. And thank you all for joining us for this episode of Turning Point. Again, if you're a CFO, whether you're a fractional CFO and you're serving a number of clients, or an internal CFO and you've got a team working on cash flow in spreadsheets, you definitely want to come and talk with us, because we're going to give you something that the management team is going to be able to understand at a glance, and it's also going to save you a ton of time and make it a lot easier to pull all of that data into something that makes sense. Thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Blaine.